This administration's intent on cutting a deal, if that's what you can call it, with Iran on nuclear power, which we all know will eventually mean big old giant nuclear bombs for Iran, and no amount of death to America seems to dissuade them. Check it out.
A car loaded with bombs exploded this morning outside the United States Embassy in Beirut, Lebanon.
The group is believed to be pro-Iranian.
19 American airmen were killed while they slept at the Khobar Towers complex in Saudi Arabia.
2 American embassies blown up in East Africa minutes apart.
An explosion claimed the lives of at least 4 sailors on one of our naval vessels, the USS Cole, this morning.
The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee tells Fox that all signs point to Iranian-linked terrorists.
Iran and Hezbollah has now provided expertise to the insurgents.
In front of a crowd chanting death to America, Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei agreed.
Boy, don't they seem like a friendly bunch. That's from a group called Iran Truth, an initiative of Center for Security Policy, which is making the case that cutting a deal is about as foolish and dangerous as it gets. Their senior vice president, former CIA analyst Fred Fleitz, joins me now from Washington to talk about this so-called deadline. That's like one out of a million deadlines that we've had that is supposedly ahead. And I say so-called because, let's face it, Kerry's going to move. He'll move it if the Iranians command him to do so. Fred, thank you so much for being here. It's good to see you. I was reading yesterday the headline coming out of these negotiations were that Kerry and the lead Iranian negotiator, who's also their foreign minister, they were in a screaming match. So it seems to be going well, wouldn't you say?
Dana, it's great to be on your show again. These talks are a disaster. Now, let's stipulate a couple of things. We surrendered to Iran on its nuclear program in 2012 when we said that Iran could continue to enrich uranium. All the talks since then have been negotiating the terms of the surrender. So what we're facing right now, if there's a deal tomorrow, and I agree with you, I don't think there's any certainty they're going to be a deal. These talks could continue for the rest of this administration. It's not whether there'll be a bad deal, it's how bad this deal will be. We know Iran will continue to enrich uranium, build advanced centrifuges to enrich uranium, will keep a reactor to produce plutonium. There's all kinds of other provisions and concessions Iran has asked for recently. I mean, I'm very worried. If there's an agreement, it's not just going to be bad, it's going to be very bad.
And the details, it seems as though John Kerry keeps walking back the demands that the United States had, all the caveats to this deal. The uranium arrangement, the plutonium-producing reactors, the verification, the sanctioning, all of this stuff, these are things that one after the other he keeps folding on, and I'm not quite sure, Fred, we're not getting anything out of this. I mean, isn't a negotiation kind of supposed to be a two-way street?
Well, I think that's exactly right. For example, there was a report in early June that we proposed to the Iranians that they wouldn't have to allow IAEA inspectors into non-declared and military facilities if they agreed to a number of token inspections of these facilities, and the IAEA could speak to a few scientists. Dana, if we can't send inspectors to every facility, we can't be sure Iran has stopped pursuing nuclear weapons, because that's where this activity is taking place. The question here is are these talks really intended to stop Iran from pursuing nuclear weapons? I think the question is clearly no. The president decided that an Iranian nuclear bomb is inevitable, and he's conceding the bomb to Iran.
So is this just kabuki theater?
Well, I think it is, and I think it rests on the assumption by this administration and many liberal foreign policy experts that if we brought Iran into the community of nations, if we're nice to Iran and normalize relations, it will start behaving itself. But Dana, there's no sign of that. Iran's behavior as a terrorist state in destabilizing the Middle East has gotten worse during the talks while we have leverage against Iran. Once it gets this deal with billions of dollars in sanctions relief, its behavior is not going to improve.
Right. I think it's to try to pacify them somehow. This is a nation that does not want to get along with us. I mean, for crying out loud, they've been calling us the Great Satan for how many years? Even if there was, which I don't think in any reality there could be, but just to be, to have a hypothetical discussion for a second, if there was to be a good deal that could be made with Iran, what would that even look like?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. On our website, IranTruth.org, we have 9 red lines. These red lines also ran in a Jerusalem Post editorial that Frank Gaffney, the president of the Center for Security Policy, and I wrote this week. Here are 9 red lines, real quick. No uranium enrichment. No plutonium-producing reactors. Robust verification. Answer all questions about past weapons-related work. Lift sanctions in stages based on Iranian compliance. Iran has to curtail and agree to major limitations on its missile program. No meddling in regional conflicts and stopping sponsorship of terror. Ceasing hostility towards Israel. And finally, releasing all American prisoners. Those are our red lines. And we've told Congress, if we're going to have a deal with Iran, these have to be part of the agreement. And I got to tell you, Dana, the agreement coming out of Vienna will be nowhere close to any of these.
Yeah, how many of these have already been ceded over?
All of them. Well, I mean, we're told there's going to be robust verification, but we know that isn't true because the Iranians won't allow inspections of those facilities.
Right.
I mean, if you go point by point, and these are also these are the positions of the Israeli government and many other experts who are watching this agreement.
Yeah, and the U.S. prisoners, the fact that that wasn't the first thing that was brought up by John Kerry or anyone in this administration, if we're going to enter in a goodwill, a good faith discussion, have good faith negotiations about nuclear capability. I don't know, maybe, Iran could start with releasing the American citizens that it has held prisoner. That at least seems like that would be a starting point. We didn't even bother with that.
Iran is poking America in the eye by holding these 4 Americans for no reason. And the Washington Post reporter has been put on trial for espionage, and I think the American pastor also has been also. This is an insult to the United States, and frankly, it should be a bottom line. We're not going to talk to you until you release these Americans.
Right, and I'm glad that you brought up, last thing, I'm glad that you brought up a Washington Post reporter is being held. Where's the media on this? The media has been giving these negotiations just glowing coverage. They've been fawning all over it, talking about, the deafness of the administration to be able to handle Iran's negotiators. And here they have one of their own who's being held up in a cell in Iran. So much for media freedom. Gosh, you can go to find Fred. You can find Fred at fredfleitz.com, and we're also going to have a link up, and you'll be able to see this video on Dana on the Blaze as well. Fred Fleitz, Senior VP, Center for Security Policy. Fred, thank you so much for all you do. We appreciate.
Good to be here.
Yeah, very informative, right? I mean, would you enter into negotiations with a country like that? In girl world, there's this phenomena called frenemies, right? And you know what frenemies are. I wouldn't even consider Iran a frenemy, just to put it in girl world millennia terms, right? I wouldn't even consider them a frenemy. We'll be back after this.